One. And we're in, guys. Episode 9. I'm Ray Farrow.
I'm Danny Hayter. Welcome to the Legion Report podcast.
Awesome. So before we start the show today, guys, we just want to give a shout out. The local company we're going to give a shout out today is Time for Nutrition. Guys, if you're into your training, you're into your nutrition side of things of the training, then they do protein bars, whey protein, casein protein, everything you want, they've got it. Okay, they're Portsmouth-based company, but they supply all over the world and all over the country as well. So definitely check them out. The prices are good and they taste good as well. That's the most important thing. Definitely good on the taste side of things. So we're in episode 9. We got, Dan, who we got on the show today?
So welcome, Emily Linnane. How are we doing?
Not bad, you?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate you coming onto the show. We know that you've obviously heard some of our previous pods as well, which is great. Now, we know that you've got a really important story to tell, and we know that there's going to be some tough moments in what we're going to talk about today. But we just want to say from Ray and myself that we think you're incredibly brave to be coming on and talking about this stuff, and knowing that this is one of the first times that you've spoken openly about everything that we're going to talk about today. So we just want to say that how brave you are, and please obviously stay relaxed, and we're here just to listen to you, and this is your show. So before we go too far, let's let people get to know you a little bit, which is so take us back to where you grew up, your school, maybe some of your younger years in terms of sport or hobbies. So yeah, take us back to your younger days.
So I grew up pretty locally. I lived in Warsash, which is kind of between Portsmouth and Southampton, if you know it, kind of outside Fareham. I went to school over in Portsmouth. I went to private school, so I didn't live actually anywhere near where I went to school. I had to get an hour and a half coach there and back every day. Grew up with, I've got a brother, lived with my mum, dad, and my nan had to move in when I was born, pretty much, I think. Sport, I did gymnastics from 18 months old, I think, like a ridiculous amount of time. I did gymnastics till I ripped my Achilles tendon, which we all know is why I can't do running wads. Such a shame. Yeah, I guess that's kind of
So
a little bit of
you started
basic.
at a young age, did you, Emily? 18?
Yeah, I think I love sports, like I always have, and I started doing that and swimming, I think, quite young. I actually didn't like swimming because I had to do like 2 back-to-back sessions of gymnastics on a Friday night before I'd then have to go to swim training. So I think by the time I used to do that, I actually hated it. But all the rest of it I loved. I always loved being active. I always kind of tried my best. It's given me a bit of help with CrossFit, as well as a bit of a hindrance because I now have hypermobility. But it's always been pretty active.
So you've always had that passion for sport.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you say you're a competitive person?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, badly.
So that hinders you as well.
Yeah. Definitely. Always gone out too fast. Always. Never learned that lesson.
I can remember you telling us you played hockey as well. Is that right?
No, it was a lacrosse at school.
Lacrosse. Okay, right.
Yeah, I was dangerous with a lacrosse stick.
That's what I was trying. I knew it was a stick, so I was trying to think what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a bit lethal, yeah.
A little bit, yeah. It's quite an aggressive sport, but like no one else in my school, like you can imagine a little private school, like everyone's really never had anything to be aggressive about in their life for the most part, apart from the odd one like me that would just come out swinging like, okay, here's our chance.
Is it is
Let
it a
it out.
contact sport? Is it contact then? Is there any contact? Sorry.
In theory, no.
Ah.
Some people do.
Yeah,
Only
it
when you
might
played.
maybe slips now and then. Like, what can you do?
Okay. So ultimately, then, like growing up, you were a fairly happy child, would you say, or would you say that there were some tough moments? Would you say that there were, that you enjoyed your childhood?
Um, no, I don't think I was ever a happy child. Like, I loved some activities that I did after school and stuff like that, but um, I grew up in just absolute chaos, to be honest. Starting from when I was born, like obviously I can't remember this, but my mum was put in prison when I was 3 months old. And my brother was like 7, I think, at the time. But I was very nearly actually born in prison. Apparently, they were trying to get her put away when she was still pregnant, and one thing and another, it held off till 3 months after I was born. But my dad was armed forces. Like, he actually got called up to go to, I don't know what war it would have been. It was in 1990. Ray, I guess,
Would
might
have
know.
been the Gulf War, yeah.
Yeah, it might have been the Gulf War. Pretty much when she was put away, which is why my nan ended up having to move in with us, because obviously we wouldn't have had anyone. And it just kind of, I don't remember being 3 months old. I don't remember being that little, but my earliest memories are just absolute carnage. Like, I remember being quite little and it was Christmas. My dad had come home from wherever he was based for Christmas. I remember telephone being ripped out of the wall and thrown through the Christmas tree. Like, most of my memories from being a kid were me just sat in my bedroom, just sat at the door like a kid would do, just listening to what's going on downstairs, just hearing screaming, shouting, crashing, smashing, like wondering what was going on, wondering if it was safe to go out. Like, it was not a good time. Wasn't allowed like TVs or anything in my room, so it was just kind of like listening to it all downstairs, like sometimes coming out to try and see what was going on. And
So would this be your parents arguing, yeah?
Yeah, it was my parents, and my brother has, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, he's got severe ADHD. He was expelled from like 7 schools. He even managed to get kicked out of a military school. Like, he was good at causing trouble. So he would be dragged into some of the arguments too. It was just always, I think I'd mainly worry if it was my brother involved, because obviously I'd want to know he was safe. I wanted everyone to be safe, obviously, but I think, it was when there's stuff that I'm not sure if I've seen or that I've just heard about at this point, which I know sounds weird, but I guess we'll kind of get into that as we go on. But there were situations, like I remember when I was really little, I was told that one of my family had boiling water thrown over them in one of the fights downstairs and had to go to hospital. And I couldn't understand it. I was never allowed to talk about it at school. Like, I figured this was just the sort of thing that happened in everyone's house, but I couldn't really understand it. So my nan was like cooking something on the stove one day, and literally I went and tried to tip boiling water over myself to see what it felt like as a small kid, because I was just so confused at the stuff that happened in this house. And luckily, like really, really luckily, she just put the pan on. Like, it really wasn't that hot. It was warm at best. But she like grabbed me, put me on the sink, like under cold water. I don't even know if she even told my parents about that, because she was so just like, what the hell just happened? But I definitely wouldn't describe it as happy. It was just confusing and chaos and pretty isolating, because I was always just kind of hid listening to what was happening.
You say this went on from a young age up into your teens. When was this sort of like?
It went on as long as I can remember. My parents never really had a good relationship, and I think my mum was quite open about the fact that they were only still together because they'd stayed together until me and my brother were old enough to move out. Which it got to a point where I was like 15 and my brother moved out, and as soon as he was away safe, she just went and left me. So she'd been having affairs and stuff like that for years, and yeah, she just kind of like, as soon as she knew my brother was gone, off she went, and that was that.
How old were you then?
I was 15, so I was kind of old enough that I could deal with it. It was just a bit of a kick in the teeth, that obviously it was supposed to be to keep me and my brother safe, and I was safe. I was fine. I was there for my dad and my nan, and I was fine. But yeah, it was just a bit of a.
Was your dad still in the forces then when your mum left?
Then I think he'd left by then.
Okay, so
yeah,
he's home
he definitely
regularly
left
then.
by then.
He was home regularly.
Yeah. I think because he was a engineer, mechanical engineer, or like he did helicopters, that kind of engineer.
Okay.
Mechanical. So he left the armed forces and he was teaching at Fareham College. Weirdly, actually, Harry, my partner now, if anyone doesn't know, he was taught by my dad at college way before we even met, because he's doing his engineering.
Oh, wow.
So when he heard my surname, he was like, "Is your dad?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "He's a terrible teacher," by the way.
Good intro on the first date.
Yeah. It's great.
So talk us through this sort of years after your so did you have any contact with your mum at that point then, or not? Was it just a case of she sort of walked out and that was it? And talk us through the years that sort of that followed.
I did still have contact. Sorry, I've got dogs. I did still have contact with her. Obviously, I was not her biggest fan. During the time, sort of as a child that I'd grown up, I was always treated very differently to like my brother by her. I say my dad probably had a worse relationship with my brother, but my mum she very much just controlled everything I did, like eating. Like if we went away on holiday, my brother would be allowed stuff and I wouldn't. Like we'd go to, there was this place where there'd be, if one person had a meal, you got unlimited like fried mushrooms and onions as a side that you could just go and refill. And like my brother would be bought a meal and I'd have to live off what he brought back in that bowl. There was like, he was allowed out to play with like other kids around the house and stuff like that. I literally point blank was not allowed out. I was not allowed to see anyone. Got to a point where even at school, I had a couple of friends that I couldn't really relate to people at school, and to be honest, I would never really fitted in. I never felt comfortable around people my own age. But she'd phone up the school, and being a private school, if you're paying that much as a parent, they do what you want, and I wasn't allowed to have those friends. So I remember being scared to go and sit in my own like classroom at lunch or whatever, because I knew that I didn't have anyone that I like spoke to or that liked me. So I'd go and sit on my own in the changing rooms at lunch and just be like, I was so isolated and manipulated and under control that it took me a long time. It took me until the last few years, and bear in mind I'm 30 now, so it took me till late 20s to realise the extent of this control she had over me. So I kind of just, everything she ever did, no matter how much it hurt me, like I would just still be like, oh, it's my mum, I don't have a choice in it. Like that's who I'm supposed to be able to trust. So that's yeah, kind of just, I wouldn't say forgave, but would just get on with it and do what I thought I was supposed to.
Do you speak now? Sorry, Ray.
That's right.
Not really, no. We have very strained contact occasionally. But to be honest, when there was a lot that came out in the last few years through having to see psychiatrists and stuff like that to work out what was going on, that they've kind of turned around and they were like, you realise you were abused as a child. and I didn't realize, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I've never known it doesn't happen in every house. Like, I was never, there was a couple of times I'd go to school and say stuff to people's parents, and obviously it would get fed back because it'd be a concern, and it would be very kind of like, this stays within the house, this is private family business, you can't tell people about this. Like, I just never knew any different until recently. So I kind of, if I ever hear from her now, I very much think about what the motive is behind it, or like what means of controlling me basically is coming out of her trying to contact me, or like, I'm more aware of it now, but that's recent, very recent.
So just going on from there then, so your mum left when you was 15, and then obviously you so this had what the controlling had a lasting effect on you from obviously after she left the house. So you had an eating disorder, is that right? Did that start when you was 15, or did it start a lot younger?
It started when I was younger. When I was about 13, I went away on like we had family friends. Like, I didn't have a lot of contact with people outside of school whatsoever, so kind of was quite enthusiastic to go away with like family friend. They had a girl who was a couple of years older than me that we'd hang out with. Went away with them, and when I was away, I was drugged and attacked. I can't say the R word like to this day, but I'll say attacked and kind of let you fill in the blanks there. And I woke up the next day. I've never, like, the drugs that they use for that kind of thing, like, I've never felt that ill in my life as when I woke up the next day. And I woke up just covered in bruises, covered in blood. Like, the other girl that was in the house, she came in and just pulled the covers off me and saw the state of me, and she kind of said, you need to go and get in the shower and clean up before anyone else sees this, because if your parents find out what you've done, and like put it on me. And I was terrified, and I remember just trying to clean myself up, but like every time I looked in the mirror, like, it was all I could see. I felt like other people could see it when they looked at me. I didn't really understand that it was attack. I thought it was my fault. Yeah. And that's when it really started, just having that level. Sorry.
That's all right. No, don't apologise.
It's having that level of like helplessness, and it just feels like every last bit you've still got of yourself is just taken away, and you don't have any control over it, and you just don't know what to do. And I think between that and the control I already had from home, I had a lot of control at home anyway of my eating and stuff like that. Like, it was just a way of gaining back something, which is difficult to explain. Like, anyone that listens to this that has been through an eating disorder will probably understand that it's a means of like, okay, I can control what's going into my body, and I can control what, like, it's just a way of just gaining something back, and it's the secret, and it's yours, and no one can do anything about it. So that basically, I didn't get help for that until I was about 20. I went through stages because I had bulimia as opposed to like anorexia. There's not always such a noticeable weight loss straight away, because you're really messing with your metabolism. Like, you're giving yourself food, your body's expecting to take it in, but then it's not receiving it, and you don't always lose weight in the same way. So it did go unnoticed for quite a long time, until I literally got to a stage where I was throwing up blood, like just coughing up blood in my hand, sat on the sofa, and my friend that I was living with at the time saw and called the hospital, and I'd ripped my esophagus from throwing up so much. And then I got admitted to hospital, where I had to stay as an inpatient for a while I tried to work through some stuff.
Was it at that point that you, obviously you kept that to yourself, because you were saying about the control side of it, that you never had that control, and this was a really important thing to you, that you could control this for the first time in your life almost?
Yeah.
Was it at that point when you're in hospital where you said, where you were maybe opened up a little bit about it to try and get some help, or did you still sort of carry on saying, actually,
Still kept
no?
it to myself.
Right, okay.
I just couldn't physically do it. Like, I felt like I had this physical block on emotions. Like, whenever I'd been upset about anything as a kid, like if I tried to talk about it, my mum was going through worse than me. Like, it was just shut down. I wasn't even allowed feelings, and that was just so embedded into me that as an adult I just couldn't speak about them. Like, it didn't matter how badly I wanted to get better or make something of my life, like I couldn't access it in myself. So honestly, like, staying in hospital, it was just like a little holiday. It sounds really bad, but it was like a safe place. I had my own room. I had like no one. I mean, I was super controlled, obviously. I had to sit and eat in front of someone and be watched for an hour after I ate to make sure I didn't throw it up or anything. But aside from that, I was allowed to like just go and sit outside and talk to people when I wanted. And I think it did me good in some ways, because it gave me a little bit of hope back that actually maybe I can still function as a bit of a normal person. And especially, like, no offense intended to anyone, but there were some people in there that were a lot further gone than me in terms of like mental health. And someone at the door. So yeah, I think it kind of gave me a little bit of help, and it did help me a little bit, but just not in the way it was intended. I came out with the same problems as I went in with, basically.
Okay, so that was when you was 20. When did you start to seek help for? Because you must have started like going through your 20s into your late 20s.
Archie, sorry.
Sorry, you'll be quiet in a minute.
Sorry, Harry's saving me.
So you went through all your 20s, still going through all this, even though that you was in hospital when you were 20.
Yeah.
And you still went through all, like, I'm assuming you went through your whole 20s in a sort of like a roller coaster, I would imagine, having relapses, all sorts. When did you realise that you needed to seek some sort of professional help?
Not till probably about 25. I went through a relationship when I was just literally fresh out of hospital. Like a few weeks later, I met this guy and ended up living with him, and he ended up being abusive too. I think people have said to me, like, when we've worked through this, that a lot of people that have these kind of childhood experiences of being controlled and manipulated, they almost seek out someone that has the abuser's qualities, which sounds really sick, and obviously it's not something you consciously do, but it's almost like the people that were supposed to protect you and look after you and give you food and shelter have these qualities, and then eventually as an adult that's what you see as safety, even though it's terrifying to you. So I ended up in an abusive relationship.
Do you know what I mean? It's what you know, so you're drawn to, you know.
It's what's familiar, even though it's scary.
That's what I mean, familiar,
yeah, it's what makes you feel safe, but at the same time not, I guess. It's really, it just I kind of understand it a little bit in my own head now, but still when I kind of say it out loud, I'm like, this doesn't make sense, but that's how it works apparently. So I went through it. Just that one went just gradually worse and worse. Like, it started out fine, obviously we moved in together, like I didn't have any concerns. It started with like really weird control things. Like, I plugged my phone in downstairs into a plug socket that he didn't want me to use. Like, I'd never known he didn't want me to use this plug socket, but he didn't. Literally came in, I was in the bathroom at the time, smashed through the bathroom door to tell me that I wasn't allowed to use this plug socket. And like things like I'd leave towels in the bathroom as like a hand towel, and it would be like, towels never dry properly in the bathroom, you can't leave a hand towel in here. So I'd take the hand towel out. I was like, okay, fair enough. And then I'd hear like myself absolutely being screamed at from downstairs, like, why is there no hand towel? How am I supposed to clean my effing hands? And I'd just be like, just confused, like, I don't know what the rules are in my own house. And then that just got gradually worse and worse until it got physical. I was taking time off work, having to try and hide what was happening, because I worked in a call center at the time, and I went for a couple of weeks where like I couldn't physically move my jaw. Like, I'm pretty sure it was broken, but I'm not sure. So while I was going through that, my eating disorder got worse and worse and worse. I started going to the gym as an escape on the way back from work, and I'd like to think that was kind of the beginning of my recovery, because it was an escape and it gave me a little bit of confidence. It wasn't that I'd actually sought help, but it was that I found a way to like channel into something, and kind of like, I have a lot of trouble identifying emotions and what I'm feeling and stuff like that. But when you're at the gym, you can kind of like, you can feel something and you know what it is. And it just grounds you a little bit more. Like, it's almost like a really, really like, I don't know. It's almost like a mindfulness thing, but like a bit of an extreme one. Yeah. So I guess that was the first step, but I fell into like bodybuilding. So I had like a personal trainer, and it was more of a bodybuilding thing. It wasn't functional or CrossFit or anything like that. And obviously training for aesthetics mixed with eating disorders like doesn't go well. I ended up so weak that I had a trainer had to strap me into a lat pull down so that I could pull it, because I couldn't physically grip it even without the weight, but I still needed to train. Could barely lift anything. It got to a point I was too weak to even walk to work, so I was off for long term. And then I just had enough, and I kind of told some people, like one of my friends, what I was going through, and she was like, you need to leave, you can come and stay with me, like, we'll make sure you're okay. So I went home and I told him I was leaving, and I grabbed some stuff. He like tried to throw a glass bottle at my head, and I managed to duck and it hit the wall, luckily. She was waiting in the car outside, just literally grabbed what I could and just ran and left and didn't go back. And found out that he'd managed, I still don't know how he did this, but he'd managed to hack into my phone. So he knew where I was, and he could read all my texts. Like, he knew, I don't know if it's because of an iPhone, he managed to get into like the iCloud or something and get it all, but I just wasn't safe. It had to go to the police. I had to have a police escort to go near my house. Like, it was awful. It doesn't, I don't know, I guess I tried to do things to make myself feel a bit better, like the gym and stuff like that, but I don't think I ever sought help. I think it just got to a point where it was just survival. Like, I'd have to go and do certain things to survive, and that in turn would mean that people found out, and that would lead to help. Sorry, you guys, I feel like I'm going on. Like, I'm probably not even answering the same questions and just going on.
No, you're absolutely fine. I was going to say about when you were younger, you mentioned about how it was difficult because you were being forced, obviously, not to have friends and things. So as you got a little bit older, you said that when you met certain people, they would obviously try and help you. So did you find that difficult to find people to actually help, not just to help you, but actually find people from the outset, because you just weren't sort of, you know, as we grow older, we have this sort of social ability to meet people. It just sort of is,
Yeah.
you know, we integrate children into school so they can, you know, socially adapt to other people, and you sort of didn't really have that. So did you find that difficult as you grew up, knowing that when you did meet someone, you know, there was actually going to be help there?
Yeah. I never really, even now, I don't trust people easily at all. Like I'm very quiet at first, or I'm very loud. Like I'm one or the other, but I kind of feel like it's a bit of a cover up. Like I still now don't really know how the right way to socialize is in certain situations. Like I avoid big gatherings. Like if I'm meeting new people, it will either be like I will absolutely freeze and have a panic attack, or I will be really kind of like force myself to be how I think I'm supposed to be. And I don't do it deliberately, and I don't want people to think I'm fake with them, because especially at the gym, like at this point I'm familiar with everyone, like it's fine. But just like in a lot of situations, I feel like I almost have to put on what I think is right from what other people do.
So you almost step out yourself and almost become almost like an actress, so to speak.
Yeah, kind of.
Step out
It's
of
just
you.
kind of like, what do people do in this situation? Okay, I'll do that. I'm
Yeah.
lucky Harry's really loud, because I can just kind of stand there and he'll kind of do it. And by the time I get around to like, it's already a conversation or whatever. There's no awkward like having to start something, and it's quite good. But yeah, I think I never really let anyone in expecting them to be able to do anything to help or anything like that. And actually a lot of the friends that I made as an adult were very destructive friendships. Like it would be a lot of drinking, it would be a lot of recreational drug taking, it would be just, I think anything to not face being sober, like I was in for. And I think you kind of think those people are your friends because you're spending time with them. Like they're not really, they're just all just, they don't want what's best for you. They want you to keep cocking up because it's fun for them, like to keep doing it with you. And I think it only became when I was in a situation where I kind of got myself a decent job and stuff like that. Like you meet work friends and they tend to just sometimes be the more responsible ones that you kind of can rely on a bit. And when they find out, then sometimes you meet someone and you're lucky enough that they can help.
I heard, I actually, just going back to that, the destructiveness, I actually heard a comment, and I think it was on another podcast that I listened to. And it was about an individual who would like to go out for a drink but could control their drink. And what they used to do is, there was another one of their friends that they knew couldn't control their drinking. For example, they would go off the rails and they knew that they couldn't control it, but they were really good people to be around. So what this first individual would do is invite this person out for a drink because they knew that this person was such a great person to be around for a night out or a day out, but then would almost pick them up because they wanted them for their own gratification, so they can like enjoy their day or night out, and then let them go once they've finished, not knowing the impact to that person, that they can't control that either intake of drugs or intake of drink. And I think it was just when you mentioned that there about the destructive friendships that aren't really friendships, it sort of works along that line.
Yeah, I'm glad you're like, I feel like I'm really bad at explaining things, but you've obviously got it because that's a perfect example of what the sort of thing I mean. Like, I think if you've been through something like that, like a kind of like a life that's quite toxic to begin with, I think you just gravitate towards the wrong kind of people just because, again, the familiarity thing, I guess, it's the chaos, it's just, it's what you know. But hopefully as you grow up, you kind of like just in life, oh sorry, it's asking me to update something. Oh, no. Yeah, I think as you just go through life and get older, obviously you come across people that have more life experience anyway. They've come through stuff themselves, they know how to support you. Like you kind of just come across these people that actually are good people eventually. In my experience anyway. I guess there's probably people that aren't that lucky, but I found some good people by accident.
When did you know that you had to make a change in your life to find that happiness? When was it? When did you realise, like, something has to change now?
There's been a few stages in my life where I've literally been suicidal, and there's a couple of times where I have acted on it, obviously not successfully. Usually when I've been very, very, very drunk. So I think that kind of happened one too many times and kind of scared myself out of it a little bit. It's weird because most people, I feel like if they say that they've been suicidal and they've attempted it, there's a massive thing that set it off. Like they'll be like, this happened, it was just the end of what I could take. And for me, I don't think there was. Like, I think it just got into I was just in pain daily, like emotionally, like just pain. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I would try and drink and do things to cover it. And it would get to a stage where even then I realized that I just couldn't cover it. And okay, I would just give up and just on impulse kind of be like, I'm going to end it. Like, I don't want to wake up again. Which, yeah, I think the last time I kind of did that was when I was like, must have been the last time I acted on it. I was about probably when I just got out of hospital for the eating, and I kind of knew then that I needed to change and I wanted to change, but I just couldn't until much later. So I think it's kind of waited until I got to an age where I understood a little bit more and that I was more settled. And it just kind of like, I started getting memories of some of this stuff coming back that I hadn't thought about for years and years. I'd just been unhappy, but I didn't know why. And I think that's quite a common thing. Like sometimes if your life's been chaos from the start, you kind of wait till you get to a safe point and it just all hits you like a ton of bricks and you're like, okay, I need to get better.
I guess where you've been going through it and your roller coaster's been up and down, all of a sudden the roller coaster comes to an end and you almost remember that ride that you've just been on.
Yeah.
And it sort of hits you and it's like, wow. It's probably a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
So where did you seek help? Where did you go?
So I originally, I think about 25, I ended up, I was watching a documentary on Netflix. I think it was called like The Hunting Ground, and it was about the culture in America with like frat parties and stuff like that, and there's a lot of like sexual abuse that goes on in that. And I was watching it and I just remembered like what had happened to me when I was young, when I was like 13, and I was like, but I didn't think that ever bothered me. Like I'd forgotten about it. I thought that was just a thing that happened and I was over it, but turns out I'm not. It's just hit me at 25. And then the person I was with at the time, because I was up the entire night, like I was watching this at like 4 or 5 in the morning because I just wasn't sleeping at all, just came out and I was just having full on panic attacks watching this, and he was like, what is going on? So I told him, and he actually called Parks, which is a local service for sort of domestic abuse and sexual abuse and stuff like that. They do, I think it's charity based or a non-profit, but they provide counselling to local women for that. So I went there and I couldn't really talk. Like it was the same thing. Like obviously I'd been referred there and they knew why I'd been referred there, but I just couldn't talk. Eventually they literally said to me, like, we don't think you're ready for therapy because you're coming in and you're not willing to talk about anything. So kind of left that, and then last year, actually, Harry had to refer me to the crisis team because I got so bad. And that was the first time I think I've actually been able to open up properly. And then they diagnosed me with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which similar to normal PTSD, which I think we'll be familiar with. Obviously, Ryan spoke about it a few weeks ago, but it's got some kind of added bits to it as well, which, yeah, I then started getting some support with. I can't even remember the original question now. I've just kind of been banging on off.
Go on, Dan. Go on.
I was just going to say, did you feel, obviously you're at that point where you started to open up, did that help? Did that help
Yeah.
you? Did it help that you could start talking about things and being a little bit more open? And obviously that was now the right time for you to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's quite a hard condition to diagnose. And if I hadn't have started opening up, like, I wouldn't have ever got a diagnosis for it. But I'd been talking to Harry a lot about experiences, and I just started opening up more and more and kind of letting him know things. And then when he went and got me the help, like, he came with me, and it was like, okay, I'm already with someone that knows this. I'm just telling one more person. And I had the psychiatrist there was amazing, to be fair. He sat there, he kind of like timelined with me. Like, I told him that I don't know the order this stuff goes in. Like, even now when I've been explaining it, it's probably come out really jumbled because I block out parts of something but remember a different part, and won't remember if this happened before this, if I was 5, if I was 10, like, I just don't remember. So he was really good sitting down trying to like timeline things. And I guess a little bit of a relief as well that when I started talking about things, it's like there was a reason for why I was the way I was. I think I'd always kind of felt like everything was brought on myself. Like, I had these really deep feelings of like guilt and shame that I felt like every time I was in a social situation, someone looks at me, that they could see the stuff that I'd done, like they could see it in me. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's just how I felt. Like, I think running through it and them kind of saying to me like, no, this isn't okay, this will cause this, you know, it just made me feel a bit more like, okay, I've been through this stuff, but that's the reason. Like, it's not just me, I can fix this, like, there's hope.
I think that's quite an important point you make there about when you opened up and when you spoke about it. You know, I've got, you know, people I know, obviously I won't go into detail, but you try and have a conversation, and you try and eke out certain information that might help them speak, and they're just not ready.
No.
And I think sometimes there's this, you know, we see a lot of it now, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but, you know, there's a lot of adverts and things around on TV, and it's all about, let's talk, make sure you talk to someone, almost like it's forced. And I think we've almost got to have a bit more of a balance between forcing people to tell you what their problems are, but also making sure that they're ready to tell you those things, because a lot of things that people go through in their heads is like you mentioned, you don't want to talk about it. You know, it's something that you do try and lock away, but ultimately, you know, you can't. So I think you've almost sort of demonstrated that when you're ready, when the time's right, is when it's most effective. Like you said, you went to parks, and that just wasn't the right time.
No, and I'm sure they're great and they help a lot of people. I don't want it to sound like their service wasn't good, but I couldn't use it at that point.
Yeah.
I think also there's a bit of like, everyone has like that friend that you would tell anything in the world to, like, or someone close to you that you feel like you could, you know, if you were ready to talk, you could. But as much as people will say, oh, if anyone ever needs to talk, I'm here, and I'm sure people were being genuine, like, you don't just phone up someone one day and be like, I was abused, by the way. Like, can we just talk about like it doesn't work like that unless it comes up naturally, and unless it's some very odd circumstances, it doesn't really come up naturally. There isn't always a place where you can just open up if you're ready. Like, sometimes it's a case of like you have to wait and get professional help before you can do that, and that's not as readily available as it needs to be. So yeah, it's tough. Like you say, there needs to be a balance, but I wouldn't know what that would be, to be honest. It's so difficult.
No, that's it. I don't think anyone knows the answer. You just don't want to say to people that are suffering through certain things that they have to go and speak to somebody, or they have to go and speak to a friend, or that's sort of, like you say, you can't just pick up the phone and go, oh, by the way, like you said, there's a lot of people out there that will offer that service, not only personally but professionally. But ultimately, you're sort of saying to people, look, there's not this instant need for you to go, right, I better go and do it now, because that's what I'm being told to do, and that almost brings on an anxiety that maybe doesn't need to be brought on. You almost have to be like, well, you're almost saying when you're ready, because that's when it's going to be the most effective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the problem with that is obviously if you build it up, then suppressing it, then you go through a lot of stuff that I've been through that maybe wasn't necessary. Like, if it had come out in the first place, then I wouldn't have suffered with a lot of the mental stuff. But I don't know. I'm not a professional. I've got my own experience, and that's all I've really got. But yeah, it's tough. I think it's important to keep letting people know, like, that you can always talk to you, and that if they need anything, that you're there. But at the end of the day, until they're ready to, like, you can't make them, and you shouldn't make them.
No, Emily, what are you doing now? What's life look like now? How are you dealing with your diagnosis, and how is life?
So I've got some little tools in place that I've never had before to help me. I've got, so with CPTSD, they basically, I wish Harry could explain this because he knows it better than me from what they explain, but like, when you're a child, obviously you learn about emotions and how to deal with them, but I never developed those neurological pathways or something. So effectively, in terms of emotions and stuff like that, I'm a little bit like a child. Like, I don't always know what I'm doing. So I have these little mood cards, which I'd really recommend to anyone else that has it. And literally, you have to go through, and it's got kind of stuff on all the different feelings, and it's kind of like just learning as if you're a child that what things are, and learning to cope with it. And just little things like that. Like, I'm kind of just trying to build up everything that I should have built up as a child and work through it that way. But
it's probably a simple question, but so those mood cards, they've got colours for different types of mood that you're in. Right?
Literally, they have little faces.
A little bit, because
they're so cute.
Oh, they have faces.
They have faces. So you have like shame. It's got a little face. And like, then you turn it over, and it kind of like helps you identify it. It tells you like questions you could ask yourself. It's got like positive ones too. It's got mindful. It's got, I think there is one that literally says like positive. So there's nice ones as well as bad ones.
Okay.
But it's kind of like little tools like that they might seem really childish, but actually for adults with this condition, like, these little things can help you really build the stuff that you're missing, that in future can hopefully you can function like a normal person at some point, is the dream.
How would you use that then? So say if what would you like initially feel sad, and then you look at the sad card, or would you show that to someone else to show them how you feel?
So we had to use these this week, like, for other completely unrelated reasons. We have had like the worst week. And for someone like myself, if you've got CPTSD, you don't feel sad or angry or disappointed. Like, you just feel like this gut-wrenching pain, and you don't know what it is. Like, it's just unbearable. And so how I've been taught to use them is that you kind of go through and you kind of read through them and you're like, do I think that? Like that it maybe lists a few thoughts, and you'll kind of go through and be like, are these the thoughts I'm having? Is this towards someone? Has this caused it? And you can identify it and be like, okay, I'm frustrated.
Gotcha.
And
yeah, I understand it now. Yeah.
it really helps you communicate, but also it just helps like build those little bridges in your brain that tell you, so that you don't have like these outbursts, these emotional outbursts. Like you don't have these overwhelming emotions that you can't control in the same way that like an adult would normally be able to rationalize them a bit, and you can't. So yeah, I've got little things like that are kind of in place, and it's a very slow learning process. But hopefully one day I'll get there. And aside from that, I'm just, obviously I live with Harry now. We've got our two very annoying little dogs that wanted to interrupt the podcast. Very much into our CrossFit, as you know. We're the absolute like little fans of CrossFit that follow the games and everything. Just kind of focusing on the good stuff that keeps me happy and take it from there, really.
Are you using exercise to help you with your conditioning as well?
It helps. It reminds you, like, especially something like CrossFit, it's so tough that it kind of, it teaches you to bear with it whilst you're doing it, but then you can get through it. But also, like, it's performance goals. Like, you may not be able to run something in this time this week, but you keep working at it and then you do it. Or like, you can't lift this weight, but you keep working towards it and then you can lift it. It's just constantly reminding you that you're stronger, faster. Like you constantly bettering yourself and just proving yourself wrong, and that you can do things that you never thought you could do. I think just mentally, aside from like the endorphins and stuff like that obviously help anyway, like it's just the best thing you can do to help your self-esteem.
With
And I think, like, as far as like role models as well, I think I came from like bodybuilding, as we said earlier, that gave me quite an unhealthy image of myself. The first CrossFit I saw was Annie Thora's daughter doing like DT, and I was looking at her and I was like, this woman's insane, but like she's amazing. And I think it's such a positive, you know, these women are strong and they're not afraid to do this stuff. They're not afraid of people turning around and being like, oh, that's a boy's thing to do and you look like this. Like, I just think there's a lot about the sport that is really positive for people in kind of any situations probably that you've had on the podcast to get through one thing or another.
Definitely. It's I think you mentioned there about sort of going in and getting faster and getting stronger, and one day going in somewhere and not being able to do something and then going in the next day and trying again. Is that important to you to sort of set goals, not only from a training perspective, but from a sort of life perspective, to have like something to really target at? Is that really important to you to sort of go through?
I think, yeah. I struggle a lot with like self-esteem and stuff like that, like more than it comes across, I expect. So I try and hide all this stuff as best I can. But I think for me, just constantly being able to prove to myself that I can do this stuff and that I can get a bit better. Like, it's just like every time you get a bit stronger, you can get a little bit mentally stronger too, because you've proved to yourself yet again that like, I've beaten this, like I've worked towards this, I can do. It's just that feeling of you can do anything, but obviously just in CrossFit, but it kind of leads out to your mindset about other things too.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So, I think it's like, sorry, Ray.
No, go on, mate.
I was just going to stay quickly with the little goal thing. Like, you know, I think it's good to set, like you say, just little goals where you go, oh yeah, that's cool, I've achieved that today. Then that almost gives you like the smallest little boost.
Yeah,
it might just
does.
be the smallest thing. It might just be, say, like you might read, for example, you might read a workout and you might go, oh, it looks awful. Just to get that done today would be a really good goal for me. Yeah,
it is exactly that. Like some days just I I'll be so anxious to actually go out in public that literally just showing up at the gym when I've said I would is like a massive achievement. And I could come last and not be able to lift like my normal warm-up weights, and I could fail like hell with everything else, but I'll be like, do you know what, I went, that was really tough for me and I did it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
How's the lockdown treating you?
It was hard to begin with, I guess. I think the hardest bit has genuinely been not being able to go to the gym, from a social aspect, as well as, you know, the stuff we're talking about. Obviously, that's a big coping mechanism that kind of missing out on, and trying to do bits at home, like home workouts with the kettlebells and stuff. But I'd say that's probably been the hardest overall. But I think as it's eased up, like we were talking about before the podcast, managed to go paddleboarding yesterday, which was really nice. We're actually seeing Steph from the gym on Thursday for a little socially distanced barbecue thing, and we went for a dog walk the other day with the distance, and it's been okay. I think certain people have kind of like been there to check in on me and be like, I know you're probably struggling, so just messaging to see how your day's been and stuff, which is really nice. So yeah, I don't think it's affected me too badly. I think it's just missing certain things, which we all are. So yeah, it is what it is.
So I think if you can take any sunshine out of it, is that there's a lot of people probably feeling exactly the same. I think that's probably one thing that's helped me, I think, being part of lockdown, is that I want to do these things, I want to do this, and then I think, but there's probably thousands and millions of people that are saying, I want to do those things as well.
I think it reminds you to like really appreciate who you've got as well. Like, it's been nice, obviously every couple of weeks we've had the Legion quizzes, so we've been doing on Zoom the little quizzes and stuff like that, and it's just a nice little, like, it reminds you that these people are all genuinely your friends. Like, it's not just at the gym that we do this stuff, like we're all friends outside of that too, and it's a nice reminder of that, like having to make more effort to be on Zoom with people, to message people, to not just rely on like you're going to run into them and be like, all right, and that's it. Like, you have to really put the time and effort more into your friendships to, I think that's really nice. I think actually there's a lot of people that me and Harry like appreciate that a little bit extra after having this, which I think that's definitely a positive to take.
Yeah, I think like you see a lot of these independent gyms, these small gyms that, you know, we speak about it a lot, but the community side of things is what, because you go to any gym and have a workout, but having that community where people talk and just interact and work out together, and I think that is a massive thing for mental health. I think
Definitely.
it's not something you can get on your own. You can do working out on your own. And I think this has proven that, really. So hopefully some of those smaller gyms will come bouncing back from this, and more people will join those gyms to get that, really, and they get those benefits as well.
I really hope so. I think like our gym's shown like how much we all value like what you've created for us, basically, with the community and everything. Like, I think it speaks for itself. At a time like this, it tests people's loyalties. Like, and I'll be honest, if I was at like a chain gym where my membership was like £13-14 a month, I wouldn't be paying it because I can't use it. But my Southern Legion membership, I'm like, are you kidding? You're not allowed to reduce it. Like, when you said you were going to look to reduce it, I was like, no, because it just means so much to us, and I think it speaks volumes that how much we all value it for like what you've done.
Oh, that's good.
Emily, you've been amazing.
Pause it for 1 second. One down.
I was going to say that, I think you've been incredible to come on today, to talk about some of the things that you've come on and spoke about. Is I can't really put it into words actually, because I think it's been incredibly brave, and I think that I need to find a better word for that, but I can't. So I'm sorry about that. But
Thank you.
it's
I second that. Emily done like Danny said, just to come on here and speak about some of the really like sensitive subjects that you've spoken about. We do really appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure that, you know, like we said at the beginning, before we came on air, that, you know, there's a lot of people out there go through similar situations. So if it can help them to know that they're not alone, do you know what I mean? So you've done a really good job today.
Thank you. And I think it's just, I think one little thing that I did kind of want to raise a little bit of awareness of is that there's this really common thing with like kids that are maybe having a really bad time at home. They're going to be like the dirty kid, the one that's not got, you know, new clothes, the one that's not really, you know, well looked after or whatever. It's not always the case. Like if you see these behavioral problems and stuff like that at the beginning, like it may be a concern. And I think that a lot was missed with me because of those stereotypes. And I think it's important for people to realise that it's not always just this one straightforward situation that can be classed as abuse. There's a lot.
Okay.
So yeah, just wanted to add that.
yeah, no, that's I think that's a good point. I think it's a good point, well made, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again,
for
Emily.
having me.
Pleasure. Guys, so that's a wrap. That's episode 9. Check us, subscribe and like the YouTube channel, or check us out on our other devices, audio devices, Danny.
Yeah, Apple Podcasts. So subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, and you can also listen to us for free without an account on Spotify. So just download the apps. So that was episode 9, and we have one more episode for our first season, which has been incredible. So thank you, Emily, for coming on. We look forward to episode 10. So guys, stay tuned for episode 10, where we review all of our guests for season 1. So we're going to go through some little parts, and we're going to talk about each individual that's come on and supported the Legion Report podcast throughout season 1, and we can't thank those guys enough. So Emily, again, thank you for coming on today. Extremely brave of you, and I certainly think that there'll be people out there that will listen to your story, and it certainly will help.
Hopefully.
Yeah, they will. Like Danny said, we're doing a review on episode 10. Really looking forward to that, going back to all the guests that have come on, the amazing guests that have come on and told their story. We'll review, and we'll hopefully pull out some really key points from those stories that you can sort of summarise in. Okay, so look forward to that next episode. Okay, guys, until then, stay strong.
Stay safe.